The door opened into a chamber unlike anything Alexander had imagined. The air was warm, almost holy, glowing with a golden hue that pulsed like sunlight trapped underground. At the center of the room stood a stone pedestal, and upon it, the object his family had whispered about for generations. The chest of gold. It wasn't just a chest. It was an artifact, iron-bound, carved with the same spirals that had guided him here, its surface shimmering faintly as if alive. Around it lay piles of treasure, coins, goblets, weapons, jeweled crowns. Riches beyond comprehension. But Alexander barely noticed them. His eyes locked on the chest. He approached slowly, every step echoing like a drumbeat in his ears. His fingers trembled as he reached out, touching the ancient wood. It was warm to the touch, pulsing with some hidden life. With a deep breath, he unlatched the iron lock. The chest creaked open. Inside was not only gold, though there were coins enough to fill kingdoms, but something far more precious. A bundle of weathered journals, their pages fragile, bound in leather. He lifted one, his throat tightening as he read the first line. "To the generations after me, this is our truth." Tears blurred his vision. It wasn't just treasure. It was a legacy. A map of his family's past, their sacrifices, their blood written into history. Behind him, the chamber pulsed with golden light, as though the mountain itself was blessing the discovery. Alexander whispered through tears. This was never about the gold. But still, as his hand closed around the heavy coins, he knew one thing. The world would never believe his story. But they would believe the gold. The skeletal hands scraped closer, their rusted blades dragging across stone, the sound like nails on glass. Alexander pressed his forehead against the golden door, sweat dripping into his eyes. His lips trembled as he whispered the words carved before him. "The gold is not for the greedy." He thought of his grandfather's stories, of curses, of men who disappeared chasing the treasure. He thought of the symbol spirals, always circling inward, as if reminding him, everything ends where it begins. And then he understood. The truth wasn't about the gold. It was about him. About why he had come. He slammed his palm against the door and shouted, voice echoing through the chamber. "I don't want it for wealth! I want the truth, my family's truth!" The cavern trembled. The spirals across the stone blazed with golden light, so bright it burned his eyes. The riddle dissolved into glowing dust that scattered like fireflies. The door groaned, ancient gears shifting within the mountain. Slowly, painfully, it began to open. Behind him, the skeletons halted mid-step, their red eyes flickering, and then extinguishing. One by one, they collapsed into heaps of lifeless bone, the chamber silent once more. Alexander fell to his knees, breathless. He had spoken the truth. And the mountain had listened. Alexander's lungs burned as he sprinted through the chamber, the sound of clattering bones echoing behind him. He weaved between skeletons, their rusted blades swiping inches from his skin. One caught his jacket, tearing it open, but he didn't stop. At the far end, his flashlight beam struck something that made his heart leap. A door. Massive, carved into the very wall of the mountain, its surface covered in spiraling symbols and golden inlays that glimmered faintly under the dust. It wasn't just a barrier, it was a monument. A gateway to something greater than all the horrors he had faced so far. He reached it, pressing his palms desperately against the cold stone. The symbols pulsed faintly under his touch, as if alive. But there was no handle, no lock. Only a riddle carved across the surface in an ancient script. "The gold is not for the greedy. Speak the truth or remain with the bones." His throat tightened. He could hear the undead warriors drawing closer, their clattering growing louder, their red eyes glowing in the dark. Alexander closed his eyes, whispering to himself. "Truth! What truth do you want?" Behind him, a skeletal hand clawed across the stone. He had only seconds to solve the riddle, or become part of the chamber forever. The roar of the river faded as Alexander stumbled down a narrow passage. His arm burned where the shard had cut him, blood dripping steadily onto the stone. He pressed it with a rag, muttering curses under his breath, but there was no time to stop. The tunnel opened into a cavern unlike any he had seen before. The chamber of bones. Hundreds, no, thousands, of skeletons littered the ground, their bones yellow and brittle with age. Some still wore scraps of armor, rusted beyond recognition. Others clutched broken weapons, swords snapped in half, shields shattered. The air smelled of rot and rust, thick and choking. He knelt, picking up a cracked skull. A hole pierced straight through its forehead, clean and precise. Not the work of time, but of battle. And then he realized, these weren't random deaths. These were guards. The ones who had once sworn to protect the treasure, or die trying. As his light swept the room, he froze. In the far corner, Bones shifted. Slowly. Deliberately. His stomach nodded. It wasn't the wind. Something moved among the dead. The silence shattered as a pile of bones collapsed into a grotesque figure, a human skeleton, animated, its empty sockets glowing faintly red. It staggered forward, dragging a rusted blade across the stone. And then another rose. And another. The chamber rattled with the sound of ancient warriors returning from their graves. The rocks beneath Alexander's boots trembled as the river churned louder, the water frothing like boiling tar. His flashlight beams swept across the black surface just in time to see a shadow pass beneath him, long, massive, sinuous. Then came the sound. A low, guttural rumble, vibrating through the water into his bones. Alexander's mouth went dry. Whatever lived in this river had been trapped here for centuries, guarding the way forward. He forced himself to leap to the next rock. His landing sent a splash into the river. Too loud. Too much. The creature struck. A massive, scaled tail whipped out of the water, smashing the stone where he had just stood. Shards exploded into the air, one slicing across his arm. He stumbled, barely catching himself on another rock. Blood dripped into the current, carried away instantly. The river roared in response, as though the scent of blood had awakened its hunger. Alexander's breath came ragged, panic clawing at his throat. He sprinted across the final stones, every leap fueled by pure desperation. Behind him, the surface erupted as a serpentine head broke through the water, scales black as coal, eyes glowing faintly yellow in the dark. He hurled himself to the far bank, collapsing onto the wet stone just as the creature lunged. Its massive jaws slammed shut inches from his boots, then vanished back into the river with a deafening splash. Alexander lay there, chest heaving, the truth pounding in his head. The treasure wasn't just hidden. It was guarded. The labyrinth ended abruptly, opening into a cavern so vast it stole his breath. A roaring underground river cut through the chamber, its black waters churning violently, foaming as they disappeared into unseen depths. The map showed a crude drawing of the river, a line cutting across the parchment with strange symbols drawn above it. No bridge was marked, no way across. Only a warning scribbled in faded ink. The river takes what is not worthy. Alexander crouched at the edge, the icy spray dampening his face. The current was impossibly strong. One misstep and he would be dragged into the abyss. Behind him, faint echoes of pursuit reminded him the rival wasn't far. He had no time to hesitate. He spotted a series of jagged rocks jutting out of the river like stepping stones. They were slick, sharp, barely wide enough to balance on. But it was his only chance. Heart pounding, he leapt onto the first stone. His boots nearly slipped, water splashing violently. He forced himself onward, each step a gamble with death. Halfway across, a roar rose from the darkness below. Something massive shifted beneath the water, disturbing the current. Alexander froze, his breath catching. The river wasn't empty. Something was alive down there. Watching. The passage twisted into a labyrinth. Alexander's lungs burned as he ran, the stranger's footsteps echoing somewhere behind. The air grew thicker, the stone walls closing in, turning the tunnel into a suffocating maze. The map trembled in his hand as he unfolded it on the run. His flashlight beam shook across the faded ink, revealing jagged lines that seemed to mirror his surroundings. Left. Right. downward. He realized with dread that the cave wasn't just a tunnel, it was a labyrinth, deliberately carved to confuse intruders. And if the map was even slightly wrong, he could be trapped forever. He slowed, forcing himself to breathe, to listen. His ears caught faint echoes, not only footsteps, but something else. A low rumbling, like distant thunder, coming from deeper within the stone. The walls here were covered in carvings too. Strange, spiraling symbols that seemed to shift in the flashlight beam. His mind played tricks on him. For a moment he swore the carvings were moving. Watching. Suddenly, the ground trembled beneath his boots. A slab of stone fell from the ceiling, smashing into the floor behind him with a deafening crack, sealing the path shut. He wasn't just lost. He was being herded. The silence between the two men stretched, heavy as stone. Alexander's grip on the knife tightened, his pulse a war drum in his ears. The stranger finally tilted his head, speaking with unnerving calm. "You think the treasure belongs to you? Your family's little bedtime story? No, this gold was never meant for one man." His voice echoed in the chamber, cold and deliberate. "Who are you?" Alexander demanded. The man stepped closer, the beam of the flashlight sliding across his face. He was older, maybe in his 40s, his skin weathered, his eyes sharp like blades. "My name doesn't matter," he said. "What matters is that your great-grandfather betrayed the others. He took the map for himself. The gold belongs to all of us, and I've been waiting a long time to finish what he started." The words hit Alexander like a hammer. Betrayed? His great-grandfather, a traitor? His mind swirled with doubt, but he had no time to dwell. The stranger's hand moved toward the revolver strapped at his belt. Alexander's instincts screamed. He flicked his flashlight upward, blinding the man for a second, and sprinted down a narrow passage at the far side of the chamber. Shouts echoed behind him. The race for the treasure had begun in earnest. Alexander thought the worst was behind him, but he was wrong. He continued deeper into the tunnel, the silence broken only by his ragged breathing. The passage twisted like a serpent, leading him into a vast chamber. Stalactites dripped from the ceiling, and pools of water reflected his light in broken shards. But something was wrong. A boot print. Fresh. Pressed into the mud. His stomach dropped. Before he could react, a voice echoed from the shadows. Low, cold, deliberate. "You shouldn't be here." Alexander spun, flashlight shaking wildly until it landed on a figure stepping from the darkness. A tall man in a dark coat, his face half hidden beneath the brim of a wide hat. His eyes gleamed like steel. How do you know about this place?" Alexander demanded, gripping his knife. The man smiled, thin and humorless. "The same way you do. Your great-grandfather wasn't the only one with stories to tell." The stranger stepped closer, boots splashing softly in the water. Alexander's blood turned cold. He wasn't just following a map anymore. He was in a race. And the other player had just revealed himself. The passage was suffocating, the air stale as if it hadn't been disturbed in centuries. Alexander ducked low, his shoulders brushing against damp stone. His flashlight flickered once, twice, as though warning him to turn back. Then he saw it. The floor ahead looked different, smoother, cleaner. His instincts screamed. He crouched, brushing away a thin layer of dust. Beneath it, he found the edge of a stone slab. It wasn't part of the natural floor. It was a mechanism. A trap. Carefully, he picked up a loose rock and tossed it onto the slab. The cave roared to life. With a deafening crash, spikes shot from the walls, stabbing through the tunnel. The rock shattered to dust. The spikes retracted just as quickly, leaving only silence behind. Alexander's heart hammered. If he had taken just one careless step, it would have been him impaled against the wall. Wiping the sweat from his forehead, he edged along the wall, pressing himself flat to avoid the pressure plate. His breath came ragged, but he managed to slip past. The realization chilled him. Whoever had hidden the treasure had not only buried it, they had protected it. The cave swallowed him whole as he pushed deeper inside, each step echoing back in hollow whispers. The air grew colder, damp enough to cling to his skin, and the beam of his flashlight shook with the trembling in his hand. He reached a dead end, or so it seemed. Smooth stone blocked his path, glistening with moisture. For a moment, despair twisted his gut. Could the map have been wrong? But then he noticed something: faint grooves in the wall, not natural, but chiseled by human hands centuries ago. He ran his fingers across them, tracing spirals that matched the ones from the map. His pulse quickened. Alexander pressed his weight against the wall. Nothing. He tried again, harder this time, his shoulder slamming into the stone. A dull rumble vibrated through the cave. Dust fell from the ceiling. And slowly, with the grinding groan of stone against stone, part of the wall shifted inward. Behind it, a narrow passage yawned open, a secret tunnel that had been sealed for generations. A bitter draught escaped, smelling of ancient dust and iron. He stared into the darkness of the hidden passage, his skin crawling. Whoever had built this, they had not wanted it to be found. By dawn, Alexander's nerves were frayed. He hadn't slept. Every rustle in the dark had kept him awake, clutching his knife and the map as if they were lifelines. But the map pulled him forward, step by step, deeper into the mountains. Finally, through a wall of twisted fir trees, he saw it. The cave. Its jagged mouth gaped wide, black and hollow, like the open jaws of some ancient beast. Cold air poured from within, carrying with it the damp stench of stone and something else, something metallic, like old rust, or blood. He hesitated. Every instinct screamed at him to turn back. But the map left no doubt. This was the place. With a deep breath, Alexander lit his flashlight and stepped inside. The darkness swallowed him whole. The beam flickered across walls slick with moisture, glistening like veins of silver. The cave dripped steadily, every drop echoing so loudly it seemed the stone itself whispered back. Then his light caught something carved into the wall. Symbols. The same spirals he had seen on the stone marker yesterday. Only here, they were larger, deeper, painted with something dark that had stained the stone. He raised the light higher. The carvings told a story: warriors dragging heavy chests up the mountain, battle scenes, men falling, blood spilling. And at the end, a great stone door drawn into the side of the mountain. Alexander's hand trembled as he traced the lines. This was a record, a warning, or a map within a map. Suddenly, a sound tore through the silence. A rock clattering against stone, deeper in the cave. His flashlight swung toward the noise. Shadows twisted violently on the walls. For a brief second, he thought he saw movement, a shape darting just out of sight. He was not alone in the cave. The forest had changed with nightfall. What had been a silent but tolerable trail during the day was now a suffocating labyrinth of black shadows. The fog thickened, curling low along the ground, glowing faintly in the pale moonlight. Every tree looked like a figure, every branch like a claw reaching for him. Alexander gripped his flashlight like a weapon. Its narrow beam of light cut through the mist, but the darkness swallowed it almost instantly. His heart raced faster with every step. Then, a sound. A sharp crack, like a branch snapping underfoot. He stopped. The forest went completely still. Even the insects had gone quiet. "Who's there?" he called out, his voice hoarse, trembling in the night air. No answer. Only silence. He swallowed hard, forcing himself to walk forward. His boots crunched on the damp earth, but after 2 steps, he heard it again, a second pair of footsteps. Perfectly timed. Echoing his own. He swung the flashlight behind him. The beam trembled in his hands, sweeping through the fog. For a moment, he saw nothing, and then, just at the edge of the light, his stomach dropped. A figure. Tall, motionless, half hidden behind a tree. Its face lost in the darkness, but its outline was unmistakably human. Alexander froze. His hand instinctively went to the hunting knife at his belt. But the second his light fell fully on the figure, it was gone. Vanished into the mist as if it had never been there. Impossible! He whispered under his breath. His pulse hammered in his ears. He could feel it now, eyes somewhere out there in the dark, watching him. Following him. He had to keep moving. Whatever was out there, it wanted him to know he wasn't alone. And that realization was far worse than any silence. The morning mist hung low over the Carpathian peaks, rolling in thick, ghostly waves that seemed to shift and breathe like living things. Alexander stood at the edge of the village road, staring at the mountains with the ancient map gripped tightly in his hands. The red X on the parchment burned in his mind like a brand. He had packed light, a rope, a hunting knife, a small flashlight, a flask of water, and the map. It wasn't enough for a real expedition, but he had no time to waste. Something told him that if the map had survived this long, then others might know of it as well. And if others knew, then the race had already begun. The forest swallowed him quickly. The tall pine trees rose like pillars of a forgotten cathedral, their tops lost in fog. The deeper he went, the less the modern world seemed to exist. No birdsong. No wind. Only the crunch of his boots on wet earth. He stopped once, swearing he had heard footsteps echo his own. But when he turned, there was nothing. Just the endless wall of trees. By noon, his path became treacherous. The map showed no real trail, only crude lines guiding him through ravines and over ridges where a single misstep meant a fall into darkness. Once, he slipped on wet stone and nearly tumbled down a gorge. His fingers caught a root at the last second, leaving him dangling above the abyss with his heart slamming against his ribs. He climbed up, gasping, realizing that his journey had already crossed the line between adventure and danger. Then, just as the shadows began to lengthen, he saw it, a stone marker, half buried in moss. It was unlike anything natural. Carved symbols spiraled across its surface, weathered but still legible. The same symbols he had seen faintly drawn on the edge of the map. Kneeling, Alexander brushed the moss away. The stone was cold, almost unnaturally so, and as his fingers traced the carvings, a chill ran down his spine. They were not random markings, they told a story. Warriors carrying heavy chests. Battles fought in the mountains. And at the bottom, the same strange emblem that had been on the Bible's cover back in his grandfather's house. This was proof. His great-grandfather hadn't been telling bedtime stories. The treasure was real. But just as his excitement surged, a twig snapped behind him. Alexander froze. Slowly, he turned his head. Through the mist, far between the trees, a dark silhouette shifted, watching him. His throat tightened. He wasn't alone in the mountains. The night was unusually silent in the Carpathian Mountains. The moon hung low, casting silver shadows across the abandoned wooden house where Alexander had just arrived. This was his late grandfather's home, a place he had not visited in over a decade. The wooden floors groaned under his steps, dust floated in the stale air, and every corner seemed heavy with forgotten secrets. As he searched through old shelves, his hands brushed against the thick, leather-bound Bible. Its cover was cracked, its pages yellowed with age. When he opened it, something unexpected slipped out and fell to the floor with a faint whisper. A map. It was old, hand-drawn, the ink faded but still legible. Among the mountain ridges and deep valleys, a bold red X was marked. At the bottom, written in an unfamiliar but firm script, were the words, "Whoever finds this place will find the treasure that will change their fate." Alexander's heart raced. He remembered vague childhood stories his great-grandfather used to tell, wild tales about hidden gold buried somewhere in the mountains. He had always dismissed them as bedtime legends. But now, holding the map in trembling hands, those stories no longer seemed like fantasy. The room suddenly felt colder, as if the walls themselves knew the weight of the discovery. Alexander realized this was not just a piece of paper. This was an invitation. A calling. And something deep inside him whispered, his life was about to change forever.